I wrote a book.
You did indeed.
And it's called My Big Ego. It's a practical application of My Big Toe. Yeah, what I tried to do is take My Big Toe and simplify it so that the everyday average person could understand it and then perhaps learn how to apply it in their own life. And you read it. So what'd you think?
Well, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. It was honest. I think that's the thing. If I had to say anything about it that was dramatic, that kind of came through, and that it was brutally honest. You were not afraid to tell it the way it was. You didn't sugarcoat any of it to make it seem better or make yourself seem better than you were. You just, guess that we should tell the listeners of this a little bit about it. The book starts out with you. Well, it doesn't start out that way, but very quickly it's about you who leave home at a very young age, like what, 13, 14, something like that, and go live on the streets to, make your fortune all by yourself without any of those stinking adults trying to tell you what to do. And like most young people, you kind of figured that you already knew almost everything and that you could get by just fine. And this is a chronicle of your very slowly, growing up and evolving and understanding and getting bigger pictures. And the pictures got bigger just a little bit at a time. You'd get a little insight, and that would help, you take the next step, and then you'd get a little more insight. So it was what, over a 5, 10 year period, of which, this is Vanessa Wideski growing up, learning to make better choices and better decisions that have positive results, not negative results, and that have a good time and feeling good, though positive, isn't necessarily something that you can base your life on. It doesn't have the substance and the quality that you need to base a life on, and that just took a while to realize. But it was a good book. I think a lot of people who feel like they, particularly young people who feel like they'd like to get out from under the boot of their parents or of the, of them, the establishment, the people that make it really hard for everybody else. And they think that that's sort of all they needed would be the freedom and everything would work out fine. Realize that that's a whole lot easier to talk about than it is to live. That's a tough road to hoe. And the probability of success is low. Probability of success is just very low. You're not going to walk out of your house at 14 and, the next few months become independently wealthy. It doesn't work like that. It's a hard, it's a hard way to learn. Now a lot of children don't do that. They kind of stick with the program until they've, gone through high school, gone through college, have a degree, get a job, and then they start thinking about what's important and what's not and what's meaningful. And instead of them having a crisis at 14, they have a crisis at 40 or 35. Suddenly thinking about, is what I'm doing really profitable? What am I producing that's meaningful? How significant is my contribution, to the world or even to myself or to my community? And they start looking at themselves and finding out that, they're actually pretty self-centered. They're not really so much about other. They're pretty much about themselves. And that, what they call a midlife crisis, then is a big learning point where they kind of, relook at who they are and where they are and what they're doing and why they're doing it. Questions that they hadn't asked for before. They've never asked those questions. They just did it because that's what it was they did. So the learning process is a tough one, no matter what age or how you go about it. But you started the process very early, whereas most kids at the age where you were out on the streets, they're being taken care of by their parents, and the parents make sure that, nothing bad happens to them. And if they make mistakes, the parents kind of help them through it. But so you jumped in early, got what do they say, baptized by fire. You had to deal with with life on your own at an age where you were not very equipped to make it on your own. Found others like yourself and kind of hung together with them, just eking by enough to stay alive and get something to eat every once in a while, and I guess buy drugs were a very important part of your life then. And then to work yourself out of that is pretty remarkable, I think, in the way you did it. It was very straightforward. You didn't have anybody come and pick you up and take you home and dry you out and find you a job. You didn't have any of that. You just figured it out on your own. This isn't working. I've tried this and then I tried that and none of it's working. What do I need to make it work? And slowly all those answers came. And by the end of your book, you're not only doing well, you're doing very well. You're in a good situation with good relationship, good connections, good enough income stream, and good relationships with your children too. So, success story, Vanessa. I think it's a story that helps other people kind of see where they are and question the choices they're making. As people read your book, they'll start thinking out, well, where am I? And why am I doing the things I'm doing? And how is this a path of growth for me? Or am I just turning the crank on the same old thing and every day is just like the last day without ever really questioning, is this a valuable path for me to take? Which is kind of what you did. You kind of looked back and said, I'm doing all the things that I thought would make me happy, but it doesn't make me happy. I'm still miserable. What's wrong? So that's hard to do. Most people can't make that observation. They can't see that. So although you took plenty of punishment before you got to the point that you did see that, but still, I think that's a remarkable thing to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And often when children like that run away from home or do the sort of thing that you did, somebody goes gets them and pulls them out of it, and eventually, though they resented it first, they realize that it was a good thing, but they didn't actually get out of it on their own. But you did. You just figured it out, and so can everybody else if they just try. And I think that's the important thing about your book. You'll show people that, all right, if a 14, 15, 16, 18-year-old can ask those questions and figure it out, so can they. And then if you're serious about doing something, I don't want my life to keep going on like this. I see it, and it's in a descending arc, not an ascending arc. It's only going to get worse, so I need to step in and stop that and make it go the other way. Well, that took resolve and it took courage. So that, I think, is the value of your book. It helps people see the situations that they're in. Their situation may not be as drastic as yours. Well, they just may be in a dead-end job turning the crank that they don't really want to do just to make ends meet, and they're just tired of it. Well, there are other things they can do, other ways they can contribute, and to decide that, well, I'm going to spend some time volunteering, to help feed the homeless or something. Instead of just turning that crank, going home, watching TV, you can actually do something more useful, for life. Give back. And that will start opening all kinds of other doors. Because once you turn around and start going the other direction, suddenly you have choices that weren't there before. You create a whole set of new choices. You meet new and different kinds of people. And an inspirational story like yours, I think, helps people kind of get hold of their life and see that they can do it. They can change themselves. It's like it's never too late. If you're 70 years old and you just figure it out, well, great. The next 10 or 20 years that you get to live, work on it. It's not like, oh, time's gone by. I'm 40 now, so there's no sense doing anything now. My life's almost over. Well, that's just, woe is me kind of self-pity, getting caught up in your big ego. And they have to realize that that's not the case. Wherever you are, whatever the conditions are, you can always do better. You can always change things. And the magic of that is that if you change things for the right reason, things start to break for you. They start to work out for you. Things start to pull together when you're doing things for the right reason. As long as you're doing things for the wrong reason, everything goes to hell in a handbag. Everything, is dysfunctional, and you just keep getting deeper and deeper into dysfunction because you're not doing things for the right reasons. So just changing the why of your life will change everything else. If you just change that why, the rest of the world will kind of shift a little bit to help you find what that new why should be for you. And you didn't talk a lot about that in the book, but things did work out. They opened up for you. You got breaks, you got situations, you got a job, you got introduced to people who could be helpful, people who inspired you, whatever else. And those things happened because you had the right attitude. And if you hadn't had the right attitude, none of those opportunities that helped pull you up would have happened. So that's the way it works. And your book is a good example of that. And it's mostly valuable because of the total honesty with which you delivered it. Because many people writing a book like that would tend to make themselves look better than they really were. And you don't hesitate to call yourself, a failure. This isn't working. I'm not doing it right. Here I am, and here's my attitude, and here's where it's taken me, and it's not good. And that's hard for people to admit. But if you can't admit it, then you're stuck in a belief trap, and then you can't make any progress. So you kind of hit all the MBT points there. You get belief traps, you get bad choices. You have to have some sense of self that you can do it and you can change. You don't feel defeated. You don't become a victim. You take responsibility. All of these things are the steps of kind of owning yourself and taking charge of yourself. And in your book, you can just trace, one step, the next step, the next step as you kind of progressed up that incline to lift yourself up out of that morass that you were in that wasn't going anywhere good. So you could probably think back, well, what would have happened to me if I hadn't been like that? If I just kind of kept up that life and, more and more fun or pleasure or drugs or whatever, well, you probably wouldn't have made it. You probably, you probably wouldn't even be alive now. You would have hit the dead end and ceased to flourish.
Mhm.
And a lot of people do that. Some of them are the people that we call homeless. They've hit a dead end, but it doesn't mean they have to stay there. They just need a helping hand to get picked up and straightened out and kind of motivated to go be something better than that.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to do.
It's not an easy thing to help them and to motivate them, or to be in their shoes, or both.
Yeah, both,
Yeah.
both. It's not easy for them to change, given that you're there and you're trying to motivate them and it's just hard for them to change, to see the world differently, to
Mm.
see that they reach out for it, things could get better. Because once you get in that sense of feeling like a victim or a failure and you're at the bottom and, there, you don't see any way out, then it's really hard for you to turn anything around because you no longer have any faith in yourself, your ability to, to change your situation. And when you get into that spot, it's hard to turn around and people will come and try to give you good advice and, things like that perhaps, but you don't really believe it. Yeah, well, maybe help somebody, but it's not going to help me.
Right.
That's the big ego in the
Yeah.
my big ego. You have to get over that.
And for the folks who are in that space, I feel like we, the people who are not in that space, have a responsibility to help them because we can see a bigger picture and they're stuck in the small picture. And we can't just let them struggle in that space. We have to do something to help them, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's part of our kind of moral imperative that we do that. This idea that I'm only responsible for myself, I'm not responsible for anybody else. It's not about me, therefore I don't care about it. That's a very self-centered viewpoint, and that self-centered viewpoint will keep you from growing. We have to help the people who need help. We should generate a society that helps give those people back their dignity, their sense that they can do something, kind of lifts them out of where they are. Now, that may cost something to do that. That's not free, but the gain is much higher than the cost. Because if you can accomplish that, now you have a productive citizen working, paying taxes, you know, interacting, having relationships. You've taken somebody who's dysfunctional and made them functional. And that is a great contribution to your culture and your society and just, to your race, to humanity. So sure, we should do that. And not everybody is reclaimable. Some people have just lost it, or maybe they have brain chemistry deficiencies that makes it difficult for them to make choices that are good choices. There are some people like that. Well, those very few people, but they're few. They're not the majority. There's just a few of those people, maybe 10% of them. But those 10% then just need to be taken care of. Just because we're humane enough to say, you know, they deserve to be taken care of. It's a different attitude than everybody for themselves, rugged individualism. If those people can't make it, well, they deserve to, they deserve whatever they get. They're just not working hard or this. But when you make those kind of statements, they're not trying, they're not working hard, they're defeated. So you write them off. That's simplifying their problem. You think they're just there because they're lazy.
Yeah.
Well, that's not why they're there. They're not lazy. That's not it. They're just there because they're drug addicts. Well, they may be drug addicts, but that's a symptom. That's not the cause. Mostly the causes just are a whole chain of personal failures, sometimes just some bad luck and poor choices, and maybe even just very difficult situations that if you could just give them a little help, they would turn around. So I think that's for the great majority of them are like that. And for the few that aren't, well, we need to take care of them. I mean, what do we do with the people who are dysfunctional? With the people who are mentally ill, the people who can't just go out and hold a job and do the things that, most people do. We don't just, shoot them or push them off a cliff. We take care of them. And hopefully we take care of them in a way that makes their life richer, something at a level that they can interact with. And we don't just stick them in an institution and forget about them. if we do that, then that's because we're very self-centered and really care about ourselves more than anybody else, which of course is the way our culture is. We tend to have a very self-centered culture.
We're shifting out of that, right? We're changing.
Yeah, we are. We're shifting out of that, but it's a slow shift for now, but it'll pick up later on. But we do have a very self-centered culture. We're taught to be self-centered. We're encouraged to be self-centered. You know, it's all about us. We're not really encouraged to care very much about anybody but ourselves, unless, of course, it's in our best interest. Then we can care about other people because we need them.
Hmm.
You know, oh yeah, we need parents, or we need, spouse, or we need, because we need the relationship and the services and those sorts of things. But again, it's all our need. It's not really about those people so much as it is about our need.
Mm.
And most relationships in our culture are based on need, not on love or caring, either one. People fall in need more often than they fall in love, but they think falling in need is falling in love. But that's just the way we are. So we kind of accept that and do the best we can to be otherwise. And our example will help other people. So you write a book. Now your example will help other people. So it was a good thing to do, to share your story that honestly.
Yeah, thank you. You didn't, how do you feel about, because what really helped me in life was MBT. Like, I mean, all the little pieces helped, all the different teachings and philosophies. And when I came across MBT and this theory of how the nature of reality is and how it all works, that helped me to understand why I'm here, and that I'm not here to just be about myself. I'm here to actually help people and connect and cooperate. And it was that model that really solidified that for me, because so many other teachings say that love is the answer, but they didn't logically explain it. And so MBT logically explained it. Yeah. So the way though that I tried to simplify your model, was it accurate or not?
Oh, sure. You know, you can see and engage with my model on many different levels. And after you've gotten real comfortable with the level that suits you, you'll find there's another level deeper than that. And when you get comfortable with that, you'll find there's another level deeper than that. And it'll keep going like that until you get to the point where you've gotten rid of all your fears and you don't have a big ego anymore. You got maybe just a little teeny weeny ego, or maybe one that pops up every once in a while and growls, but then shrinks back down.
Mhm.
So it's all part of a process. But yes, a young girl reading MBT, that's kind of amazing all by itself. I can't think of many, street kids picking up MBT and saying, "Oh, look, a book about the nature of reality. I think I'd like to read that." That doesn't sound too like that's going to happen very often. They're going to look at that and say, "Oh, it's a heavy book. Maybe it'll burn. Maybe we'll put it in a campfire tonight and it'll smolder for a couple of days."
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's the wrong audience. Well, it was my hope that that it might help somebody the way that it helped me, because coming across MBT helped me a lot.
Well, yeah, and people, like I say, you read MBT and you kind of get the ideas and see the logical possibilities and where you can go with it. And suddenly in front of you, you realize you have choices. You have places to go, ways to be that you haven't ever thought of before. And if that is a positive thing for you, that you say, "Oh, well, I'm going to try to work towards that functionality," as opposed to taking the opposite approach, which is, "Oh, I'll never do that. I'll never be able to do all that stuff, So if you take the positive view rather than the negative view, then it's uplifting, and it helps gives you a path and a direction, some way to go. Because if somebody just says, well, Vanessa, it's simple, just get rid of your fear. Well, that's easy to say, but it doesn't really leave a person with a whole lot of help as far as what to do. So
Mhm.
it takes more than that. A lot of people read my book, they read it very quickly, and they really don't understand any of it. Intellectually, they can talk about it, but they can't be it. So there's a big difference between getting it intellectually and living it. That's what I mean by being it.
Mhm.
And you had that unusual capacity to change who you were and be better. A lot of people have a real hard time changing who they are, but you kind of focus on it. Once you focus on it, you kind of dig in and go for it until you get there, and that's just your personality that does that. But that's kind of what saved you, that kind of an ability to see something better and then do what you had to do to get there rather than take the negative route and you know, list all the reasons why you couldn't get there. That's just your personality. The perfect person for your book is somebody just like you.
Yeah.
That would be the perfect person because they would read it and it would connect and they'd say, "Yeah, that's just the way I feel and think and am." And look, this lady's 25 years older than I am, and look what she's done, and I can do that too. That would be the perfect person to read the book is somebody just like you. But there's a lot of people who are searching and having trouble finding something that works for them, which was a more general description of the way you were. You weren't out, you weren't a bad person. You weren't out trying to hurt or damage anything. You just, were looking for a way to live and be that was positive and was okay. So that was kind of your attitude. But because you made bad choices along that, you found more pain than you found satisfaction. And that made you think about it and you did better. So people who are aware enough to do that thinking about it and realize that they could do better, when they understand that almost all the pain and frustration and anxiety and anger that you have is all self-created. It's because of the choices you make. It's the attitudes you have. It's the fear you have. It's the beliefs you have. So it's all inside of you is why you have the pain you have. And that you can change that just by changing your perspective of the world and who you are and how you fit into it. So your story is not exactly a Cinderella story. You didn't end up with the prince at the ball and slippers of glass and that sort of thing. But
I did
it
end up with
shows
the prince and the fairy
you
tale
did,
life. I feel like I have a fairy tale life
yeah,
now.
you did get a prince,
Yeah.
but you didn't have to ride around in a pumpkin or do anything like that magical.
With the evil
But
sisters.
but you
No, I didn't.
but you are a good example of how a person just by introspection and a desire to do better can end up in a really nice situation, you know. And it was a long path. You had to change your whole perspective about what was important and what wasn't. Talk about your relationships. If you go back 5 years before you met the person that you have a good relationship with, you wouldn't have given him the time of day. You
No.
said, "Oh, what a nerd! What a he's no fun. He wants to go home and play Dungeons and Dragons. I'm gonna go out drinking and you know
Oh, he likes
and
drinking.
take drugs and do things that are more fun. You know, what a deadhead. So you change your whole attitude toward life. And when you see life from a different perspective, from a different set of values, then you start making, better choices if these are better values. So that's the thing. You have to change yourself because otherwise you would have been all of your life in dysfunctional relationships because you picked the males that were dysfunctional. Those were the ones you liked, those dysfunctional ones. And the ones that weren't dysfunctional, you didn't like them. They weren't much fun.
Yeah.
So, but it's like that in everything. I just use that as an example. So
Mhm.
it's really, we change how we define reality. We change our perspective. We look at life differently. And that is not an easy thing for someone to do. But I think your book shows that you can do that and it does work. My my wife Pamela had a friend that had a very similar thing. She went through a whole bunch of relationships where she always ended up in a relationship where the guy beat her up. She was always getting slapped around and beat up. And she went through one, two, three, four, all her relationships always ended up with a guy who slapped her around. And it's, in her mind, it's because all the guys in the world are evil, you know, and so on. But she then realized, I think it was probably counseling that she went to, that the guys who weren't going to beat her up, who would treat her with respect, she didn't want to have anything to do with them. She rejected all of them. And she finally, changed the way she saw the world. And then she got a good relationship with a nice guy who treated her very well. It was the exact same thing. The guys who turned her on, who she liked, were all the ones that were also going to slap her around. So you have to realize that you are your own worst enemy. And the changes that have to take place are inside of you, not in the outside world. That's the message. And I think you deliver that message pretty well in your book. So I think it is a good book and it will be helpful to people. Probably young people more than older people because it's a young person's story.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's written in from like a grade 8 level, I would say. I'm in, okay, so I want to have positive self-talk. Yeah, so I'm not a writer and I dropped out of high school and so I'm not educated and all these things. And so that's the fear that comes up is, oh, if people read it, there's going to be critics who are like making fun of it and all the things. And can I handle the criticism, I guess is yeah.
well, there will be critics.
Yeah.
There will be critics who will say, well, that wasn't very well written,
Yeah.
nice story, but it wasn't very well written. Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's your first book. Your second book will be written a lot better. And your third and fourth book will be better yet. You learn, you grow, you get better at things. And people who criticize, the style, the way it's written, the kind of paper the book's published on, the way numbered the pages, whatever, if they criticize all of that as being unprofessional, those people really don't matter too much. Those aren't people that you should really care about what they think.
Mm.
Those are people who are trying to make themselves feel better about themselves by putting other people down. And they will criticize anything and everything. They tend to be complainers that complain about everything. And they're the way they get positives is by putting other people down because in their own mind, they're saying, I'm better than that. Oh, I'm better than that. Oh, I could write a book better than she did. This is what they tell themselves because they're very insecure. They don't have much self-esteem. So they try to self-medicate, if you will, by getting their strokes by putting other people down, making themselves feel better than those other people. Well, these people aren't people you really care about. You know, I shouldn't say that. You might care about them, but these are people that you don't really want to be friends with, and their opinion is not very important. That's the way I should say that. You shouldn't make their opinion very important. So yeah, you'll get that kind of criticism. When I do my videos, I have Keith and Donna, and they try real hard to make the video perfect. They said, "Oh, it needs to look professional. It needs to be right. That little flaw, we need to fix that." And I tell them, I say, "Look, you could fix it forever. It's my videos aren't about the quality of the cinematography. It's not about the, the clothes and the makeup, the storyline. It's about the ideas, the concepts, the understanding that I'm talking about. So if you get the ideas and understanding, and that's what you're focused on, the fact that there's a little static somewhere, or you can hear a dog bark in the background or whatever, is really not relevant. And people that make that relevant, oh, it was a terrible movie. I heard a dog barking in the background. Well, they just aren't ready yet. They're still stuck being very self-centered and trying to just say something negative about everything to make themselves feel better. So you just don't worry about those people, Vanessa. The ones who read it and say, okay, this was a story about a little girl who dropped out of school and did all these things and is more or less successful now. And it sounds like she's not an English major, with years of writing experience. So what? She isn't. That's the life story she's telling you. She didn't go that route. So the story is important. The fact that it could be written better is not that important. You read it for the content, not for, you know, how many colors are in the cover and, how glossy are the pages and that sort of thing. If that's what you criticize, then you're missing the whole point. You're not really getting it at all. So don't worry. Yes, you'll get criticism like that. It, I get a lot of crazy stuff. I get all kinds of criticism. Somebody, somebody writes in and says, look at that guy's hair. Yeah, he's wearing a wig. Well, he doesn't have hair like that. That has to be a wig. And I got somebody else that said, oh, look, he's a devil worshiper. Did you see the way he put his hands like that? That's a sign. Everybody knows that sign. I was probably waving my hands around trying to make a point, and I get some really crazy stuff, that comes back out of these videos, but I find it all amusing. It's not about me, it's about them. They're telling you what their own worldview is like and what's important to them.
And you don't have any of those fears. Like you don't have a fear of people finding out you're a devil worshiper. Like those aren't close to home. For me, I have a fear of not being enough, of not being smart enough. That's a major fear of mine. And so when I get criticized on that, it activates that fear. And that's an opportunity for me to face my fear, be courageous, and let it go. Right. So I
Yeah,
should,
it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I know you well enough to know that your first reaction will be to cry.
Yep. Oh my God, yep. I cried on a very important meeting the other day with some important people, and they were upset with me, and I started crying. I just was like, oh my God, here it comes. I started crying. They're like, do you need a minute? Do you like, I'm like, it's okay. The show must go on. But yeah, you can't hide it. Just you gotta be yourself. And anyway.
Yeah, just got to be who you are,
Mhm.
Vanessa.
Yeah.
For people who are really, trying to grow and are interesting people you'd like to interact with, people you'd like to help, or if people could help you, they're all people who are going to be interested in you because of the content you bring, because of what you offer, not whether, you could have, it could have been written better or not because of, the style of clothes you wear or how you dress or the neighborhood you live in or the kind of car you drive, or the fact that your lawn needs to be mowed, all these things, where other people judge you based on the details. Those people are very shallow and self-centered, and their opinions really don't matter much. So the people that are going to like your book are the people who read it, not because they're literary critics, but because it's an interesting story. It's a real story. It's a story from the heart. It's honest and straightforward, and that's what they'll like about it. So just don't worry about the criticisms and the ways that you aren't perfect yet. Notice I said yet. Just don't notice. Don't even worry about that. Those those opinions are not really worth much. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Content that matters, not not all the details around that content.
Mhm.
So the content is good.
And that's why I wrote it, in hopes that someone would learn or benefit and improve their lives based on the story, the content, and the model, honestly. I'm hoping that someone like me, somebody who's lost and trying to find their purpose in life, will stumble across it and say, hey, this model works for me. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but it's worth putting it out there and seeing.
It might get somebody thinking about it. Yes. A lot of times, all you have to do is show people the possibilities, and then they will get up and actually do something once they see the possibilities. But until they can see the possibilities, they're stuck. And the reason they can't see those possibilities is because of their fear. Just can't see the possibility. But when they see that somebody else who was maybe even in a worse position than they were somehow can break out, oh, that's the possibility of breaking out. Oh, it exists. Maybe I could break out. You see, that's just seeing the possibility is a big help to people. It's I have people that read my book and said, you know, while I was reading your book, I had all these paranormal things happen.
Hmm.
And my book doesn't make paranormal things happen, but
Sure
they
does.
just saw, the possibilities of these things, and they never entertained that any of them were possible before. And once they kind of relaxed into that idea of it being possible, well, there it was. They couldn't go there because in their mind it wasn't a place to go. It wasn't possible. Their beliefs kind of blocked it out. So then you change the belief. Now these things are possible. You got rid of the belief that they were impossible, and then they just start happening. You just have experiences. So your book does that. It shows that it is possible to grow yourself in a very fundamental way. You can recover from a long string of bad choices, even if you're very young. You can figure it out. You can go the other way, and just the possibility of that happening will help probably a lot of kids. They'll see that, and if they read books. When you were on that trip, how many books did you read?
I read The Way of the Peaceful. I read. hmm I was reading.
Well, then see, if their people are like you, they'll read and they'll get it, and it'll show them a way out.
hmm
But, but don't be so nervous about people who will complain about your writing or the book or the style or the way the chapters were presented. That's not important. The story's coherent, and anybody can understand the story and have empathy for the little girl that was going through all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I do feel better. And I hope that it helps others to feel better too.